And I turn around, and from behind the van comes these two folks, and one of them sticks a gun in my face. And he says, I don't want to kill you. Give me your keys, give me your car. And Dr. Gasway, it was so surreal. I don't know how else to describe it. I didn't have time to panic, react, uh, freak out, think. Um, it was like life in slow motion. I don't know how else to describe that. And all I could think is, I can't believe this is happening to me. And he had his finger on the trigger. He was ready to go to work. And very quickly, in a short list of things to do, not to do, I opted to hand him the keys.
Stay tuned. Coming up, it's part 2 of my 2-part interview with Fire Chief Jim Arie as he shares situational awareness lessons from multiple near-miss events, including one where he and his wife were held up at gunpoint. But first, let's hear from our amazing sponsor, Midwest Fire. Every day, the hard-working men and women at Midwest Fire build the most reliable firefighting apparatus to be found anywhere. Their customers know a well-built fire engine means lives and property saved. Midwest Fire, a factory direct manufacturer dedicated to helping you extinguish fire before it becomes a raging beast. To learn more about what fuels their passion, visit MidwestFire.com. Hello and welcome to the Situational Awareness Matters Show, episode 332. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this show is to improve situational awareness and decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-risk, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SA Matters mission is simple. We want to help you see the bad things coming in time to prevent bad outcomes. Today's feature segment is sponsored by our new online training platform, Gassaway Virtual Training.
Rich Gassaway served as a first responder for 33 years. Now he's an online university professor, researcher, podcaster, blogger, author, and professional speaker. Rich is widely considered to be a trusted authority to help work teams improve situational awareness and high-risk decision-making outcomes. He has delivered over 2,500 live presentations worldwide and has helped more than 90,000 workers improve safety. Rich has authored 6 safety books, and his teachings have been featured and referenced in numerous books, research projects, journal articles, and podcast episodes. He has been presenting dynamic in-person training programs since 1992. And he has hosted virtual training courses since 2014. Some of Rich's most popular programs for first responders include How Smart First Responders Use Situational Awareness to Improve Safety, Firefighter Safety, Mistakes and Best Practices, and The Leader's Toolbox, Best Practices for Officer Success. His virtual learning platform makes it convenient to train your entire team at work, at home, or wherever they may be.
We now have 33 online training programs for your members. Some of these programs are live events presented virtually, and some of them are pre-recorded programs. To learn more, visit samatters.com website and click on the Virtual Training tab. All right, let's jump into today's feature segment, part 2 of my 2-part interview with Fire Chief Jim Arie as he shares situational awareness lessons from multiple near-miss events, including one where he and his wife were held up at gunpoint. That's the truth. Now, I want to kind of go back in your history here for a moment,
Yes, sir.
because I think you said you got on the fire service at, did you say 76?
76.
76. Okay. So I'm going to guess that in 76, seatbelts weren't necessarily commonly worn among firefighters. So about at what point in your career did you become consciously aware of the importance of seatbelts as a first responder? Did that happen as a firefighter, or did it happen when you were in EMS, or when you were a chief, or where, when did you get your epiphany about the importance of seatbelts?
I think it was probably in the early 80s. Champaign was a very aggressive, progressive department, and we used to go to a lot of accidents, and we used to see a lot of bad things and a lot of rollovers and ejections, and many times those wearing the seatbelts were the ones that weren't ejected. And it was before it was even a policy or a rule. It was just kind of an internal culture thing of, yeah, do the right thing to protect yourself. And that was well before it was ever a mandate by any stretch of the imagination.
Oh, good. And I assume that prior to Champaign, like in Urbana, that maybe seatbelts weren't. I mean, it was probably far less common for apparatus to even have seatbelts, let alone for people to be wearing them early in your career.
Sure. Well,
Yeah.
you're putting air packs on in the jump seats and everything else, and
Yeah.
standing up sometimes. Oh my God, the things we used to do.
Yeah. Right. Did you ever ride tailboard?
When I was at Champaign, they had an old pumper that the new firefighters would get to go out and practice being an engineer and getting training on the minor calls, the dumpster fires, the car fires. And we'd ride tailboard going to those calls. Oh my God, that was hilarious.
Yeah, I rode tailboard probably for the first 6 or 7 years of being in the fire service, and I served on 2 departments, one in my hometown and then one when I second department. In addition to my hometown department, when I went off to college, I joined another department because I kind of missed it during the week while I was in college, and then I do my hometown on the weekend and then my college department on the weekday. And my college department had this, I guess the word you'd use is like a fast attack pumper, which was, just something larger than a pickup truck, but it had a tailboard on it. And we would ride the tailboard, and the people who would drive that truck, because it was small, would scream down the road in that truck. And we just held on for dear life, foolish to the consequences of what would happen if somebody pulled out in front of us or anything went wrong. I mean, we would have been airborne at 50 miles an hour. And, at the time it seemed exciting because we were so clueless to the consequence potential of riding that. I can remember, Jim, on my first department, my hometown department, getting up on the tailboard, like you had to grab your gear and jump up on the tailboard or the truck would leave you. So you'd have your 3/4 boots on, you'd get up on the tailboard and you'd throw your coat over top of the bar, and you would have the person just embarrassed to say this, riding beside you, kind of go around you and hold you on while you put your coat on. So you're not even holding on, maybe holding on one-handed while you're getting dressed on the tailboard, going to the call. And I'm probably losing all my credibility with all my listeners and viewers for admitting. I don't think I've ever admitted on any show that I've ever done that. And I look back on it now and say, what in the world were we thinking? It was just so standard and so normal that you didn't think anything wrong with it. And then when they put out the edict that we couldn't ride the tailboard anymore, I think we had members quit the department. They just couldn't imagine having to ride up in the enclosed area instead of that open free air tailboard, get the bugs in your teeth kind of ride.
But yeah, I can remember those days. I mean, we had 3/4 length boots, or they're 3/4 boots, and we'd be on tailboards going through sleet storms, holding on to the bar with fireball gloves, slipping and sliding our way there. And it's like, how did we do this? How did we
Yeah,
make it?
absolutely, absolutely. And thankfully we lived to be able to tell a story and kind of laugh about it now. But as I look back on it, honest to God, there's two things in my fire service career that I shake my head looking back in retrospect, and I'm embarrassed because of those things. One was riding the tailboard and not seeing the danger of that. And we'd ride the tailboard when the jump seats were empty.
Yeah.
You know, we don't want to ride the jump seat. We're riding a tailboard. And the second thing was how many times after a fire I would take my turnout gear and put it into the back seat of my car because of how good it smelled.
Yeah.
So that I could get that wafting aroma. And I can remember coming home from calls and taking a shower, and you would smell the smoke coming off of your body in the shower. And that would happen for 2 or 3 days.
Sure.
After the incident. And how much we didn't know about what we didn't know about carcinogens. And at the time, you know, more things were made of wood and wool and natural fibers instead of synthetics, but synthetics were still around, you know, so there was still the potential there. And I think of how much I purposefully exposed myself to for no good reason. And I can't do anything about it,
You can relate.
but hope that it doesn't create a consequence for me in the long run.
I understand that. One last story for you.
Yeah, sure.
Driving story. So it was about 3:30 in the morning, and I was due on a box alarm as a chief officer for a structure fire in a neighboring community. 3:30 in the morning, nobody on the road, responding, lights and sirens. I came up to a stoplight intersection, and I had preemption, had the green light, and 3:30 in the morning, there was nobody out. I looked all directions, nobody around. I had the green light, and I don't know why, but I just stopped short of the intersection. And about that time, coming over the hill from the right, going to the left, is a ladder truck from a neighboring department plowing through the red light intersection at about 50 miles an hour, going to the same call I was going to. And if I'd have made my green light turn, we'd have met, and it wouldn't have been good for me. I don't know why. Call it gut reaction, instinct, I don't know. But I stopped, and it kept me from getting nailed on my way to a burn down of a vacant restaurant fire, which would have been a horrible thing. Yeah.
What do you think triggered that gut feeling? Now, that is one thing that I've had a lot of guests on the show talk about, or things that they did or didn't do and attributed it to a gut feeling or a sixth sense, or just their internal voice saying, stop the vehicle, and they did something that they have a hard time explaining why they did what they did. Is there any explanation for why you did that?
I thought about it, and it's almost like intuitive. It just happened, and it was just like, no, don't do that. Pause, and things unfolded in front of me.
Now, did you, prior to coming to that intersection, I assume you knew that neighboring department was toned for that call, and that ladder truck would be coming down that road, or is that not even fair for me to make that assumption?
No, it was a box alarm, and this was a community. Actually, it was 3 communities over that was coming, and I knew that with a box alarm, you get a lot of apparatus responding from all directions. But I had no reason to think that ladder truck was going to be there at that time.
It's always intriguing to me that people know things by intuition and how valuable that intuitive knowledge is if they'll trust it.
Yeah.
If they'll believe that nagging voice inside their head that's trying to give them good counsel, because a lot of people don't. They just ignore it or trudge right over it. And how many, well, even some of the people in some of my interviews have said their intuition told them to do A, but they ignored it and did B and ended up having a significant near miss or a consequence that they then later say, I knew better. I don't know how I knew better or why I knew better, but my gut feeling was telling me that wasn't, a good thing to do, but I did it anyhow.
That night it served me well. That's all I know.
Yeah. So before we jump into the main story, can you think of any other instances and it's okay if you can't, where your gut feeling guided you, either in a fire or as a commander or in some way that you remember that you either instinctively followed your gut or you didn't and wished that you had? Is there any examples that come to mind quick on that?
There was a call that I was at, and it wasn't my instinct. It was someone else's that I witnessed, and it was an incident commander at a box alarm structure fire, and it was a large complex, and there was a lot of fire and rapid moving fire, high intensity, and they were doing an aggressive interior attack with large hose lines, and the incident commander pulled everybody out, and 10 minutes later the place came down. I don't know to this day what indicators he saw, but everybody was happy that he made the call that he did when he did, because I think it probably saved lives.
Wow. I would imagine that in the moment they weren't happy to be ordered out. I don't know too many firefighters that if they feel like they're making progress, that embrace the idea of being ordered out by somebody when they feel, they're like, give us a couple more minutes or, we're getting to the scene of the fire.
Yes.
So he probably got some of that kind of grief, but then 10 minutes later, they were probably giving him high fives and hugs.
Yeah. Short-lived.
Yeah.
No doubt.
And all based on his intuition that something wasn't right about that structure.
Well, and that's and you've done tons of research. I mean, that's a very interesting concept. But I think there's merit in it because we see a lot of examples of success with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I spend some time with in the class talking about. Where does intuition come from? Because it's hard to trust it because you can't really put your finger on it like you can if you remember like a specific fact that you remember from a specific class that you took or a specific book that you read. Intuition is kind of a vague and nebulous concept that you could actually have knowledge without a clear explanation as to how In fact, I share with the classes that the definition I use for intuition is knowing without knowing how you know.
Yes.
Which is exactly what you had described. Is you knew that you needed to stop, but you didn't know how you knew or why you knew, but you knew and you did it, and it obviously had a a very positive impact on the preventing of a casualty. I won't even call it a near miss because if you'd have took that intersection, you guys would have had a incursion. And the same on an incident where he ordered those people out, because had that commander not ordered the people out and ignored that gut feeling,
yes,
then they would have probably had a mayday, and if not maydays, fatalities.
Absolutely.
All right, let's transition our conversation to the incident where when I put out on my social media that I was looking for some guests to share near misses and close calls, you had sent me a private message and told me about an incident that had occurred after you retired, and then you said you've had some others, and so that's why we talked about the others. But the main one that I want to get to is this thing that happened after you retired. So kind of set it up for us and talk us through kind of in slow motion how all of this occurred for you.
Okay. So a few weeks ago, maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago, my wife and I were returning to our home in the suburbs north of Chicago, visiting family, and it was about 8:35 at night, and in that particular time, it was still fairly light out, and they're pulling into our outside parking space uh, near our condo building, and uh, and we live in a very diverse area where there are lots of people walking around all the time, and that's fine. And as I'm pulling into our space, I noticed two young men about 20 feet in front of me on the other side of a guardrail, walking along a drive for an adjacent building from right to left. One had a surgical mask on, one did not, and they're looking straight ahead. They're not paying any attention to me, so I don't pay much attention to them. So we parked the car, and I've got an SUV, so the hatch is open in the back. The right side rear door is open, and we're unloading things, and that's all I'm focused on is unloading the car, moving some things from my car to my wife's car, and parked to my left in the next space over was a full size van. And I turn around, and from behind the van comes these two folks, and one of them sticks a gun in my face. And he says, "I don't want to kill you. Give me your keys, give me your car." And Dr. Gasway, it was so surreal. I don't know how else to describe it. I didn't have time to panic, react, uh, freak out, think. Um, it was like life in slow motion. I don't know how else to describe that. And all I could think is, I can't believe this is happening to me. And he had his finger on the trigger. He was ready to go to work. And very quickly, in a short list of things to do, not to do, I opted to hand him the keys. And they took the keys, they slammed the door shut, grabbed my wife, pushed around behind me, slid back in between a couple cars and hunkered down in hopes that they decided not to shoot us on their way out. Um, they, um, they got away with the vehicle. Um, Thanks to some technology, the police quickly got involved, and we were able to track the car and got towards the city. And the Chicago Police Department happened to have their helicopter up that evening, and they diverted to this. And based on technology, is able to pinpoint where the car came to a stop. Chicago Police Department found the car, stayed on it until the ground units got there, and lo and behold, they were able to recover the car with all the belongings that evening. So fortunate in that respect. On our building is a video camera, and the next day I was able to watch the video of me pulling in, these people going past me, cutting across the guardrail, standing underneath the video camera, having a laugh, yucking it up, and watching me not watch them. And they come strolling over there watching me. I am clueless. And at the last minute, they pull the gun out and stick it in my face. And it was sickening for me to watch that, because that night I spent all this time in the fire service and a huge fan of yours, and truly appreciate and preach situational awareness. That night I gave myself an F, plain and simple. From a situational awareness point of view, I had no focus. I was distracted. I had tunnel vision, wasn't paying attention to my surroundings. I mean, the checklist of things that you talk about, and they were all me. And it made me sick. And I tell you this, and I share this, it's not for me, because all the good people that I've worked with in the fire service that you've helped out, maybe they hear this, and maybe they keep their head on a swivel, and maybe they keep from going through what we've had to go through as a result of this. The situational awareness is real. Unfortunately, in this day and age, you have to keep your head on a swivel all the time, everywhere, at all times. I live differently now than I did then. I'm a different person now than I was then. But the fortunate thing for me and my wife is we live to tell it. That's the only thing that makes this of significance.
Holy cow. Um, so let's go back to where you said things appeared to be happening in slow motion and kind of talk through, the term for that is called tachypsychia, and it truly is an occurrence where things seem to actually be occurring in slow motion. So kind of like what was that like? I've never experienced tachypsychia, although I've interviewed a number of people who have. What what did that feel like? And did that happen for your wife as well, or just for you?
No, it was for both of us, and the word that comes to mind is surreal, and I didn't even look up the definition of it, but it was like just can't believe this is happening, um, in front of my home in daylight, in an open area. It just all the reasons why this shouldn't be happening, but nonetheless it is, and it's just like can't believe it. It's just it's like a disconnect from reality, for lack of a better term. And a very a very humbling spot to be. Very talk about being reduced to. And the guy had his finger on the trigger. We could have easily been gone, and if he'd have shot one, I'm sure they'd shot us both, and that would have just been the end of us. Just yeah, I don't know how else to describe it. It was just, and I hope nobody else ever gets to find out either. It's just a horrible place to be.
Now, when they found the vehicle, the people who held you up were not in the vehicle when they
Uh,
located the vehicle.
they were not. They the police surmised they were in the area because they were hitting the key fob when they were loading the car to bring it back, messing with the police. They've not found them yet, but I'm optimistic that hopefully they will someday.
Wow, that that it, there's a really quite the wake up call lesson here that in the work that we do, we tend to have a level of vigilance while we're in uniform, on duty, in the public eye, responding to calls and know the risks of calls. But I think that many of us in when you told me that story, I could put myself in that in that situation, that off duty you feel less vulnerable to bad things happening than when you're on duty, and your vigilance can be lowered, especially if you're close to home, and and there's not you're not from a neighborhood that is prevalent for high crime,
Sure.
that you wouldn't think, it wouldn't even be on your mind that something like that would or could occur in your basically in your driveway.
Sure. Well, and on the other side of it, it's just a total feeling of violation. I don't know how else to put it. It's just at the core, just something that you just can't believe would happen or that somebody would do, and it happened.
Yeah, I've talked to people who've had their house broken into when they weren't home, and to come home and find that, and that feeling of violation, of not feeling safe anymore, knowing that if somebody could break in when you're not home, they could just as easily break in when you are home.
Sure.
That's that loss of, I don't know if this is the right word, but the loss of innocence of common life, that you don't feel as though life will ever be the same as far as your perspective of safety. Now, what was the conversation like between you and your wife after this event occurred? Not necessarily like in the moment while you were still in the parking lot, but maybe even afterwards. What have you taken on a new perspective about how you all will, protect yourselves under circumstances that might be similar?
Oh yes, and there are a number of things that we do now that are vastly different. I had a key fob, and it has a slide out hard key in case the battery dies on the car. And of course, attached to that were my house keys, which we had to get the house locks replaced the next day. I no longer carry that key ring in the key fob just to keep them separate in case you have to give up one. You don't have to give up all. If my wife parks in an adjacent parking space, when we walk out or get out of my car, she's got her finger on her button in case we need to cause a distraction or whatever. And we're watching for each other as we go. We vary our route now. The police do this all the time when they're off duty to keep people from following them and laying out patterns. And sad to say, that's what I do too. And if I'm driving through and I see something that's suspicious or intuitive or whatever, I'll take a hot lap and come back around, or maybe come in from a different direction just to mix it up. And it's sad that we have to waste so much time, effort, and energy on that, but unfortunately, that's life today, and you can't be too careful. I don't know how else to put that.
Yeah.
The next morning we wake up and my day starts with thank you, God, for another day, and thank you that I'm still alive today. That was my foothold on hope, and as it started out the day after.
Now, you had said when they walked by, one of them had a mask on and the other one didn't. When you got held up, was one of them still unmasked?
Yes, and the one that had the mask is the one that had the gun. Yes.
And the other one was unmasked, so you could clearly see their face?
Yes.
Wow, that's pretty brazen.
Yes. And they're on the video. Yes. Yes.
Oh yeah, right. And the video captured it as well. Not that it has any bearing on the story, but estimate the age of these assailants. I'm just curious.
Late teens, early 20s.
Okay, young people.
Young but experienced. As you watched, this wasn't their first rodeo. They knew what they were doing.
Wow.
So after a life-threatening experience, you have, I guess I would call it a moment of clarity. And it's given me a whole new perspective on life, on what's really important, on what are real priorities. For me, for us, that's my faith, my family and friends, giving back and living for today. I don't plan as much for 5 months down the road as I used to. I'm just glad to be here today. And so it's kind of changed perspective, but that's not all bad. And if something good can come from this, then so be it.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you reaching out to me and telling me that this had happened to you, because it's, sometimes I think the responders that have near miss events, they know they have a story to tell and they know they have lessons to share, but for some reason they feel like, well, if I go on a show and I share this, well, then people are going to criticize me, or, they're going to talk smack about me on the social feeds or whatever, and they won't share their story. They Jim, I've had, and you've been to my class, so you know that I'll give people in a class an opportunity to share their near miss experiences, and they've shared some amazing near miss experiences in a class of 80 or 100 people, and I'll catch them on a break and say, "Hey, will you do a podcast?" No, they won't do it. And it's like, you just shared it with 100 other people. So what's the difference? And they're afraid they're going to get filleted on social media. And on my social feeds, I share the links both on YouTube and then in Facebook. And people know on my social feed, if anybody talks smack, they get deleted and blocked from my social media, because that's not the platform. There are a lot of platforms where you can go and do that. And in fact, there are some people that will encourage people to throw the smack, because the more dialogue and stuff, the higher their status goes in the social media, algorithms. But I just won't tolerate people who say disrespectful things about the people who come onto my show and share their stories. But it takes courage to at least just share the story. And for that, I thank you for having the courage to share the story. I'm glad it turned out well. I'm sorry that you had to go through something like this, but for both you and your wife, to change your life perspective and that feeling of violation, and that, that, I guess, for the good side, you see the preciousness of life, but as much as you see the preciousness of life, you're also balancing it with your sense of vulnerability for things like this that can happen without any notice or warning.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, listen, I I live a greater life of gratitude these days, and certainly I want to thank you for all that you've done. You keep giving back to the fire service so much, and you shape my career, you shape my focus and perspective, and what I preach to my guys and gals. And thank you for all that you've done and continue to do. It's much appreciated, and I hope you know that.
Thank you, Jim. That means so much to me to hear that. I really do appreciate it. So thanks for being a guest on the show, and best wishes to you and your wife. Best wishes for a long, healthy retirement. You've certainly earned it after 43 years.
Thank you, sir. Stay safe.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you again to my guest, Fire Chief Jim Arie, for sharing your experiences with us today. Remember that this is part 2 of a 2-part interview, so if you missed episode 331, you're going to want to go back and give it a listen. Since 2007, SA Matters instructors have helped more than 1,200 organizations and 87,000 individuals improve high-risk decision-making, including first responders, industrial workers, military personnel, business leaders, medical professionals, utility workers, highway workers, aviation workers, oil refinery operators, and more. If you or someone you care about works in a high-risk, high-consequence, decision-making environment, then we are here to help to improve their safety and survival and to help them accomplish the most important mission of all, and that is to go home to the ones who love them. Since the start of the pandemic, I've had some amazing opportunities to present my programs in the virtual platform to groups ranging from 6 to 400. And a few weeks ago, I had an opportunity to present to first responders from the Atlantic provinces of Canada. If you're not familiar with that region, that's New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland, and Labrador. Over 12,000 firefighters serve in the Atlantic provinces, and roughly 300 of them attended the live event, and the playback link is going to be shared with all 12,000. That's quite a value for the investment. Thank you to Shannon Murray and Vince McKenzie for the invitation and coordinating and arranging that training. If you're interested in seeing a list of where we've been, where we're going, just head over to the SA Matters website, click on Program Dates under Live Training tab at the top of the homepage. If you're interested in hosting a virtual program or a live program when the pandemic is over, just click on the Contact Us tab at the top of the homepage and I'll give you a call. Remember to check the show notes for how to subscribe to our newsletter, how to follow us on social media, and how to, where we share ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to improve the skills of critical thinking and resilient problem solving. Well, that's it. Episode 332 of the Situational Awareness Matters show is complete. Thank you again to my guest, Fire Chief Jim Arie. Remember that this is part 2 of a 2-part interview, so if you missed part 1, go back and listen to episode 331. Thank you to our amazing platinum sponsor for 6 years now, Midwest Fire. Thank you to our feature segment sponsor, Gasaway Virtual Training. And thank you to our associate sponsor, Chief Miller. And most importantly, thank you, the listeners and viewers of this show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters show with Dr. Richard Gasaway. If you're interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit his website, samatters.com. If you're interested in booking Dr. Gasaway for a program, or if you would like to be a guest on his show, click the Contact Us tab at the top of the homepage.